Throughout history, there have been several unlucky individuals whose deaths can be described as more than simply noteworthy. While many have died heroic deaths over the centuries, this video is dedicated to those who died in amusing, ironic, and sometimes merely stupid ways. From being drowned in a sea of clothes, to being buried alive in cow dung, to being fatally hit with a ball in a freak accident, these are the dumbest ways people have died throughout history. Starting with one of the most ironic deaths in history. In 1871, Clement Vallandigham was a lawyer from Ohio who took the case to defend Thomas McGeehan for the murder of Thomas Myers. You see, a barroom brawl broke out the previous Christmas Eve, where it was known that Myers and McGeehan had a known dislike for each other. The night following the prosecution's argument, the lawyer conducted his experiment with a pistol to establish the quantity of residue left by a gunshot at point-blank range. He was also given Myers' gun as evidence, ready for examination. Vallandigham argued that, in the rush of the brawl, Myers had accidentally shot himself. During his demonstration, which happened in his hotel room in front of a witness, Vallandigham put a pistol in his pocket as Myers had, turned it toward himself, and pulled the trigger. But there's a massive twist. What he hadn't realized was that instead of using Myers' unloaded gun, he had actually grabbed his own pistol, which still had bullets in it. Vallandigham accidentally shot and killed himself, while trying to demonstrate that Myers had accidentally shot and killed himself. It can't get more ironic than this. But moving on, up next is one of the weirdest ways a person has died. Draco is possibly the most notorious Greek lawmaker and ruler. Famous for his strict laws and brutal punishments, most crimes resulted in punishment by death. Although he was a ruthless leader, Draco was seemingly very popular. After his reign, though, he was exiled from Athens by its citizens. He spent the remainder of his life on the island of Aegina. Despite being responsible for countless executions, his own death was rather comedic. According to several Greek historians, Draco died around 600 BC in the Aeginetan Theater. He supposedly took a standing ovation at the end of a speech. In a display of approval, the audience threw hats and other clothing at him, an odd but somewhat common occurrence in ancient Greece. So many cloaks and hats were thrown over him that he ended up suffocating to death. Can you even imagine that? But sticking to the theme of comedic deaths, the death of Heraclitus is as weird as the previous one. The death of this Greek philosopher is, without a doubt, the most disgusting on the list. A famous and inspiring ancient philosopher, he influenced the likes of Plato and Aristotle. According to Diogenes Laertius, Heraclitus died in 745 BC, and the circumstances were nothing short of unusual. Heraclitus developed dropsy, a condition that causes swelling due to fluid retention. He believed that if he stayed somewhere hot, the excess water would evaporate. Consequently, he buried himself in cow dung, and obviously this did not work. According to Laertius, Heraclitus was unable to tear off the dung and subsequently died. This guy probably deserves the Darwin Award, don't you think? Up next on the list, we have a death due to overconfidence. Many rampaging generals probably meet their deaths in this fashion, but John Sedgwick has gone down in history for his famous last words, which turned out to taunt death somewhat unwisely. During the American Civil War, the Union Army general was killed while leading troops at the Battle of Spotsylvania Courthouse. Striding out into heavy fire, he's widely reported to have told his compatriots to stop flinching. "Why are you dodging like this? They couldn't hit an elephant at this distance." This overconfidence, however, would lead to his death. A sniper promptly shot him down with a bullet to the left side of the face, killing him instantly. If death by overconfidence seemed bad, death by gluttony is even worse. The gluttony of royalty throughout history has been pretty stupendous. Henry VIII was famously extremely greedy, and many suffered gout from overindulgence. But Adolf Frederick, who reigned as King of Sweden in the 1700s, appears to have genuinely killed himself via a single excessive meal. Historians report that in 1771, he ate a feast of caviar, lavish amounts of seafood and sauerkraut, and a mind-boggling 14 servings of semla, a bun soaked in warm milk. This rich feast led to him probably dying from elevated cholesterol and mercury poisoning. But moving on, up next is yet another horrible way to die. This next entrant was done wrong by his own pet. A farmer by the name of Franz Helmut was found dead on his farm. Police were anxious to discover the reason behind his apparent mutilation and death. During their investigation, they found that there was no chicken feed anywhere on the farm. His 200 chickens apparently didn't take this very well. Since the will to live is great in all living beings, they did what they had to do to survive. They descended upon Jamaat and pecked out his eyes and heart, all in the name of survival. It was him or them, and he was vastly outnumbered. Moving on, the next two weird deaths on this list happened by freak accidents. These deaths were simply unexpected and remind us of the popular Final Destination series. Probably one of the last things you would expect to happen at a New York Jets football game would be having a flying lawnmower crash into your head. Unfortunately, for John Bowen, this oddity became a reality in 1979. During the game's halftime show, model plane enthusiasts were putting on a show for the crowd. It was said to have included aerial dogfights featuring planes made in novel shapes. This particular model plane was called the Flying Lawnmower. It was described as 0.61 meters long and made mostly from metal. Tragically, the plane crashed into the stands, striking John Bowen and Kevin Rourke in their heads. Bowen underwent surgery on a terrible gash and later died from his injuries. Rourke suffered a concussion, but fortunately he recovered. Ironically, the halftime show was being put on by the Electronic Eagles of the Radio-Controlled Association of Greater New York to promote the safety of the sport. Sticking to the theme, this next fatal accident also happened at a game. Generally speaking, you would think that baseball is less of a contact sport and less violent than a lot of other sports. But that is not entirely true. There have been a large number of fatalities connected to the game over the years, whether it is a player being beamed in the head by a ball or getting hit in the chest over the heart. Some fans have also been injured or killed by falling from the stands. In one sad story, the Goldblums, an elderly couple who regularly attended Dodgers games, went to the stadium to simultaneously celebrate her 79th birthday and the couple's 59th wedding anniversary. As they were enjoying the game from the stands, a ball flew just above the protective netting and tragically hit Linda Goldblum in the head. Ushers immediately raced to her side to see if she was okay. When she indicated that she was not, she was placed in an ambulance where she began to vomit and rushed to the hospital. After undergoing emergency surgery, she was placed on a ventilator. Mrs. Goldblum remained unresponsive for 3 days before she died from her injuries. She was buried about 16 kilometers from the stadium and the team that she had loved so much. And finally, this next incident is a lesson for you folks as to why you always need to keep your ears and eyes always open. Back in 1997, a cyclist in Sorocaba, Brazil, put his Walkman headphones on and set off on his bicycle. He was happily listening to his tunes, making his way through the city when he decided to take a shortcut to his destination. Absorbed in his music, he pedaled on, blissfully unaware of his surroundings, when all of a sudden, he was knocked off his bike by an oncoming plane. Yeah, the shortcut this guy had decided to take, LED, across Sorocaba Airport's landing strip. And with his music blaring, he hadn't heard the twin-prop plane approaching the runway to land. He crossed its path at exactly the wrong time, and needless to say, he didn't survive. Well, there's at least one important lesson for all cyclists here. Not everything is a cycle lane. Well, these were just some of the dumbest ways people have died. Which among these deaths shocked you the most? Also, do you have any stories of freak accidents you or someone you know experienced? We'd love to hear them in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more amazing content. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.